Mamelodi Sundowns lose 4-3 to Borussia Dortmund, but make Africa proud. Espérance also make Africa proud, but by winning 1-0 against LAFC. We're going to recap both of those matches coming up next on this episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast. Now, as you can see, not in Algeria, not in the United States of America. Today, I'm in a hotel in Nairobi in Kenya, here for the Africa as a Country Festival 2025. If you aren't familiar, you can find all the details in the description below. If you are in Nairobi, if you're in Kenya, please make it out to the events. I would love to meet you in person. But if not, then you can always help when we start selling our very first physical issue of africaasacountry.com. You can get your copy then. But we're not there yet, so that's why you guys are going to have to excuse the very tardy videos about those two matches. I haven't had the time really to catch up. I was flying from New York to Brussels, down to Nairobi, and so when I had a little bit of time in the airport, I was downloading the matches and then watching the matches on the airplane, making notes, etc. So I finally have time now, as I finally settled, taking a shower and everything, to talk about the matches. So let's start about Sundowns. Let's start with Sundowns versus LAFC, because I think that's the match that more people care about, and it's the more recent match. Sundowns line up with a 4-2-3-1 again, and they just make a leg-for-leg switch to take off Arthur Salas, the tall Brazilian. People used to think he was a striker, but he's actually more of like an attacking midfielder. And they bring in Teshrick Matthews, a shorter, skinnier, faster attacking midfielder who used to play, of course, at Borussia Dortmund. So I like the move simply because he used to play for Borussia Dortmund. And usually that means extra motivation. And that's just like good team chemistry. You know, players will appreciate that if a coach lets them prove themselves against a team that sort of gave up on them. So I understand the formation. There's one thing about the formation. You know, when they were playing against Ulsan, Mamelodi Sundowns, I like the 4-2-3-1 because against Ulsan, I thought they were going to be favorites. They were the betting favorites. Um, Against Borussia Dortmund, you're not the favorites. And so if you're going to play a 4-2-3-1 just with a double pivot, no, Tembazwen has been getting involved defensively and making sure he fulfills his defensive duties. I think it would have been better, like if I was a coach, like I would have probably tried maybe Tembazwane on the left instead of Teshrick Matthews, who again, I don't think has proven much to me throughout the entire year when he started matches on the left flank. And then I would have probably brought in Batuzi Obas or Jaden Adams in midfield. Just because, again, you need to make sure that you're solid defensively, and end up, of course, conceding 4 goals in this match. Now, a lot of that is not necessarily due to defensive structure. A lot of that is due to mental mistakes. But that's the only really thing that I would have liked to see, is maybe a 4-3-3 instead of a 4-2-3-1. It was good to see. I think there were more Mamelodi Sundowns fans in Cincinnati than there were in Orlando, which was nice to see. When we were at the team hotel, we were speaking to the fans there, and they told me that they were expecting the club to help to bring, hundreds of supporters from South Africa for this match in Cincinnati, and I think we saw that on the pitch or in the stadium. I even had a friend that was there who said that it was extremely hot in Cincinnati. He said it was hotter and more humid than a 3 p.m. kickoff in Mauritania, and this is somebody that's used to traveling with the team for CAF Champions League matches. So, but that's just seriously something that we have to keep in mind, even for next summer for the World Cup, because I think people forgot about the 1994 World Cup and the temperatures that were soaring over there. And it's going to be even worse this time around, of course, with global warming. But not just that, some of the matches are going to be played in Mexico, where temperatures are up even more. So you better get used to these hydration breaks. Players that play in hotter temperatures throughout the year, maybe they're going to be better suited. All of these things we sort of have to keep in mind. Finally, my last pre-match note is that I was really looking forward to this match because Mamelodi Sundowns, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many, many, they're more suited to this competition simply because they like to play football compared to the North African teams, which are usually more pragmatic and more results-oriented. Mamelodi Sundowns, they like to play football, and unfortunately for them, oftentimes in Africa, in the CAF Champions League, they'll come up against teams, mostly North African teams, but not just North African teams, that like to defend or that will sit in low blocks. And as a result, it's been very frustrating watching them at times just have almost sort of meaningless possession because teams just close off any space. And so Sundowns are sort of forced to hold on to possession and pass it back and back and back and back and back. And I just sometimes want to see a team take it to them, and attack them as much as Sundowns attack them. And I think that would make for more entertaining football because sometimes when Sundowns are going up against these little bucks, it can be boring. And so I'd like to see a team sort of attack them. And I think when they're going up against the European club, Sundowns are not going to back down from the fight. But at least we're going to get this back and forth. And I think that's why Mamelodi Sundowns, in my opinion, are better suited to a competition like the Club World Cup than maybe some of these North African clubs are. Anyways, so that's exactly what we saw in the first half. We saw this back and forth. And it starts with Sundowns really having possession of the ball, which was great to see. I mean, in the first 15 minutes, Sundowns had the lion's share of possession. And you could tell the commentators were a little bit shocked, think, oh, but this is a European club that finished top 4 in the Bundesliga, and doesn't matter. And really, they had a chance in the 5th minute, comes from Teshrick Matthews. He sort of makes a run. I think Marcelo Allende finds him with the ball over the top. Matthews cuts in on the defender, but just a poor finish. And really, that sequence, it was the first sequence of the match for him. But I think that sequence really summarized his entire match and maybe even his entire career so far. You see the potential. He has the pace. He has the dribbling where he cut in. But it's just that final ball for me that's missing for Teshrick Matthews. And again, he's young and he has time to develop that. But I think this was the liveliest I have seen Teshrick Matthews play perhaps all season. And that when he was like running, he was making runs into space, he was dribbling past players, but still 60 to 70% of the time he disappointed me with the end product. So yeah, he provided running that Temba Zwane I think wouldn't have at this age and with his Achilles problem, but at the same time, too imprecise in the final third. In the 9th minute, Borussia Dortmund have a corner kick, and I think they get ahead on the ball, but you could just see, just from that corner kick as well, that Borussia Dortmund have air superiority over Mamelodi Sundowns. And this is something that I spoke about, again, with a few people over the last week or so. With Mamelodi Sundowns, with Orlando Pirates, South African clubs in general, I think there's very good defenders, but I don't think there are defenders that are aerially dominant, like completely aerially dominant. And we saw Pirates get sort of almost abused by Fiston Mayele and Pyramids FC in the semifinal. We saw Pyramids FC score against Sundowns in the final. I I think it's because in the PSL, it's not really the style of play to put in 15, 20 crosses per game. So maybe they're less used to dealing with them. But even when you look at the size and the height of some of these defenders, they're not absolutely massive. So it's one of those where I was talking to a friend and said, why don't they bring in a player from Mali, from Senegal, from DR Congo? Because TB Mazembe's captain, Kevin Mondeko, he moved to Algeria. He was the best player in Algeria this season. And that's really been his strength, is to just clear out any balls like that. The problem, like, is if you're Mamelodi Sundowns, is you want even your center halves, of course, it starts with them. They have to pass the ball cleanly and precisely and everything as well. So sometimes I think, just bring in one of those players. Leave him on the bench if you have to, but have that in your arsenal to defend corners. Because Dortmund, with Girassi, with Ben Sebaini, with Sula, they had so much more height. Even Bellingham, even Mecha, they had so much more height than Mamelodi Sundowns had, and they paid for it later on in the match. But before that, we have a moment of magic in the 10th minute. 10 passes lead up to Mamelodi Sundowns' opening goal. It comes from Ribeiro, super goal. Ball goes pass, finds Ribeiro, and he's very good with that burst, those first 1 to 2 yards, with a low center of gravity. Players were trying to slide tackle him and knock him off the ball, but he gets low with his low center of gravity and he just holds his own. And then he has that burst to separate, within the first few yards. And he does that one-on-one with goal. I thought he should have passed it, but you can't fault him because he scores, of course, he finishes. And just one of the goals of the tournament, one of those things that I think makes other scouts from other teams perk up and say, well, who's that guy? And Ribeiro and Beleli, because Beleli had a great match with Espérance, and we're going to recap it in just a bit. To watch them go to a competition like the Club World Cup and to dominate some of these teams, and I don't use that word lightly, uh, that's made me very happy because we see them, impose their will on the African continent in the CAF Champions League. And you say, okay, it's the African Champions League. It's not the highest level. We don't know how good these players are. But then they come on this stage, and even on this stage, they're embarrassing even some players on the best teams in the world. And so for me, it shows you that they are very, very good, even in these competitions, and that these players, in my opinion, they can be playing top football in Europe. So it was just really nice to see Lucas Ribeiro have that match. He deserves it after the year that he's had, and Issa Beledi as well, 2 days ago. The problem is, of course, 5 minutes later, in the 15th minute, there's just an unacceptable error. Um, the ball's being passed around, and Sundowns were doing a good job of keeping possession and using Runwin, and he made it. I think prior to that pass, he must have made 10 to 15 passes already in that match. So he was very comfortable. He was playing those short passes as well. It's just one of those where I, I don't think he saw the Dortmund player, Nemesha. He passes the ball, and immediately you could see that he realizes he made a mistake. He tries to dive, he misses it, and Borussia Dortmund equalize 1-1. The problem is he keeps looking at Thibaut Mokoena, and you could see him screaming, Tebza, Tebza. Like, I think he wanted Mokoena to come to the ball, come to. But the problem is, like, even if he came to the ball, it was passed way too slowly and it was read way too quickly by Nemesha. So I don't think it would have made a big difference. I think that's one that Runwin has to sort of shoulder as his own mistake. Um, and that's part and parcel of playing this brand of football, is that you are going to make these kinds of mistakes. So you're just gonna have to shoulder it eventually, but you just can't be too often. Um, in the 24th minute, what do I see? I see, yeah, liveliest I've ever seen. Matthews good. In the 34th minute, they can see the second goal. Thibaut Mokoena this time gets nudged off the ball. Um, the ball finds its way to Cyril Guirassy, the Guinean striker, launches Julian Brandt, and Julian Brandt found space behind Divine Lunga time and time again. I thought the left back was very good in the first game against Ulsan, but in this game, Julian Brandt, I think, punished him several times down that right flank. And this time, he puts a cross in, and again, this is what we talked about with air superiority. Guirassy soars above everybody else and heads the ball powerfully into goal. Um, this is not one where I blamed the Mamelodi Sundowns defenders too much, because the ball's going like this and then over, and it's at the second post, and Guirassy is obviously much taller than them. But there were a few occasions where, like, I remember in the second half, Guirassy header that didn't go in, but he just, again, abused and bullied Kakana and Divine Lungu. So that's one that, yeah, they have to find a solution if they're playing, in the CAF Champions League or in competitions like this. So now Dortmund is up 2-1. And really from the 35th to the 45th minute, they look bereft of ideas. And Dortmund are starting to grow in the game. And this is, you could see the psychological power of momentum. That's really the main problem with the first run one mistake, was that Mamelodi Sundowns were on the front foot. They were dominating that match. They were dominating a match against Borussia Dortmund. And giving up a cheap goal like that, you could see psychologically what it does to a team. It just completely deflate the players. It's not that they put their heads down and gave up on the match. It's just that they were not as energetic anymore. There was a little less confidence. It wasn't like in the first 15 minutes where they could do no wrong. They were playing with unlimited bounds of confidence. So yeah, it's 2-1 now, and we're in the 43rd minute. And again, these are coaching points that you sort of hammer down, but the last 5 minutes of the first half, the first 5 minutes of the second half, you got to make sure you don't make any mistakes and that you don't concede a goal. And they do concede a goal in the 43rd minute. And again, it's Julian Brandt making a run behind that Sundowns high line, puts in a low cross run, and Williams palms the ball away. Joe Bellingham chests it down and scores a deflected goal. 3-1. 3-1, and they could have added a fourth via a grassy header. And this one is the one I was talking about, the amateur defending from Kakana and Lunga. So it could have been down 4-1 after dominating the majority of the first half. Why? Because of mental mistakes? Because of tactical mistakes? and because of a very glaring defensive weakness of balls in the air. I mean, and when that's when you see when you go up against the highest level, in European football, they'll punish you for your mistakes. I think that's the main difference between the CAF Champions League and the European Champions League is that the smallest mistakes will be punished against teams like this. And so at halftime, it's 3-1. You gifted them 2 goals. The first two were a gift, and the last one, again, you don't concede before half. So I imagine they were very frustrated, Sundowns, going into the second half, but at the same time encouraged by how they started the match off. And they start the second half off like how they start the first half off, really on the front foot. Um, they create chances from turnovers. Lucas Ribeiro gets the ball to Marcelo Allende, who takes a wayward shot. And then Tembazwane wins the ball. He gives to Marcelo Allende, who takes a shot again. It's deflected. Tries to play in Ikram Rainers, and Rainers, with the outside of the boot, he keeps trying to finish with the outside of the boot. Hits an outside of the boot. I think the goalkeeper makes a save, hits the crossbar, but he was slightly offside anyways. And then Thibaut Mokoena has a free kick that just goes slightly over as well, just by a few inches. So they start the second half really hot, Mamelodi Sundowns, and you could tell that they were eager to get back into this match. And then Dortmund score a fourth. And this was one where, if you look, they overload one side of the pitch. Uh, Sundowns midfield, you have Zwane and Allende and Mokoena. Zwane and Allende are playing ahead of Mokoena. Mokoena's sitting in like a 6, and the other two are up there. Again, this is one where I think if you had an extra midfielder, if you had Obas here, you don't concede this goal. Because what they do is they overload, uh, and they overload with midfield and lateral defenders, and they're wide and everything. They pass the ball through, and then you're outnumbered in midfield. And they start driving at the Mamelodi Sundowns defense. And it's really in a place where there should be another defensive midfielder, where there should be a Batuzi Obas. And they're driving. Kulusan Mudau it's not bad defending what he's doing. He's making sure he covers the middle so they don't get a shot off. And Kulusan Mudau is so confident with his speed. He's so fast and he's so confident that he can get to that spot. Where he knows there's his man out there, and he knows he can get to that spot and shut it down if that pass is made. He just exaggerates a little bit. Maybe he gave them maybe just a little too much space, maybe just really like 10 centimeters or so. But he does get out. The pass is made. He gets out there. He deflects the ball, and it's unfortunate that it goes in. So it's one of those where I think this is more of a tactical breakdown than poor defending from Mudau. It's a little bit unlucky as well. But now Dortmund are up 4-1. The good thing is Sundowns hit back pretty quickly off of another set piece. And again, if we're going to credit Miguel Cardozo with anything this season, I think Sundowns, apparently, I'm speaking to somebody who told me statistically, it doesn't translate. He told me statistically, Sundowns were better with set pieces under Hulani Mokoena. But I don't remember them scoring this many set pieces as they have with Miguel Cardozo. They scored another one here. Thibaut Mokoena to Ikram Rainers, who gets his second goal of the Club World Cup. And then Sundowns are playing well, but it's a 2-goal deficit. And when they score in the 90th minute, it's Lebo Mutiba. Unfortunately, he pulls his hamstring, but he's been having a great Club World Cup, which is good news for the season ahead, even though he pulls his hamstring in a bit. And then ultimately, they can't come up with one final chance to nick a draw, which would have been huge, because if they nick a draw, they have 4 points. Then they can really have not so much pressure going into that match against Fluminense. But ultimately, I thought Sundowns showed bravery. I thought they showcased the world their brand of football, and they got a lot of admirers. However, this match for me also showed that this team, despite the fact that it's chock full of veterans, can still make mental lapses. And that they have very glaring defensive weaknesses, particularly when defending aerial balls. And maybe Dortmund is a really strong team in the air, so maybe that's a little bit unfair, but still Sundowns need to do better in that domain. So yeah, I think ultimately everybody's proud of them, the entire continent, and I've seen people from all over Ahmed Musa from Nigeria, Michel Alozi from Nigeria. I've seen people all over the continent really applaud Sundowns for their performance, and I'm applauding them as well, because again, they showed bravery, they entertained everybody, they showed that we can play technical football, they showed that we're not afraid of these European clubs and that we can play with these European clubs. And if anything, that in itself, I think, is they say there are no moral victories, but for me that's a little bit of a moral victory. But still, to take it to the next level, just a little bit further, just some little tweaks here and there, and I think that's what will take Sundowns to winning CAF Champions League titles and to, who knows, maybe getting to quarterfinals or semifinals of competitions like this. Anyways, let's move to Espérance Tunis against LAFC. This match happened 2 days ago, so I'm very late with this, which is why I'm leaving this second. Um, we also line up with a 4-2-3-1 over here. The defense is unchanged. The goalkeeper is unchanged. In the midfield, we go, instead of Shihab Jbali, who started the first match alongside Okbelu and Ganishi, we have Abdurrahman Konate, the Ivorian midfielder, who starts the game. Then you have Belali, and you had Mokwana starting instead of Yansas and Rodrigo Rodriguez. So 2 changes. Konate and Mokwana in for Jbali and Yansas. Me personally, this is the best team. These are the best 11 players. I would even take off the Brazilian striker Rodrigo Rodriguez and include the Tunisian striker Ashraf Jabri. But this is a very good team. This is how I would have started the match against Flamengo. And more importantly, this provides balance defensively. Unlike, that's not what they had in the first 20 minutes against Flamengo, where Beledi doesn't have to track back and defend here. Konate, if you watch what they do, out of possession, that 4-3-3 becomes a 4-4-2. Belali will join Rodriguez up top, where they don't have to really track back. They just have to direct possession one way or the other. And then the 3 midfielders alongside Mokwana will stretch into like a flat 4. And that way, Konate and Mokwana will defend the wings, and Beledi doesn't have to track back for that. So they're catering to one of their players, but he's the best player. And so sometimes you have to cater to your best players. Now, the one thing I kind of almost wanted to see from Espérance, I wrote here, it would be great if they could shed that North African risk-averse style of playing. They try to win every game 1-0 North Africans, and in big matches, they would rather, not lose than risk winning. And it's something that I think has starting to annoy me a little bit, especially in competitions like this. Because I don't know. For me, it's just like, just go for it, Uh, the problem when you play that style of football, that North African brand, and you lose a match, you lose with so much regret. Whereas if you go at it like Mamelou Sundowns did against Borussia Dortmund, yes, there are mistakes. Yes, you regret the mistakes, but you don't regret your approach and your bravery. But anyways, Esperance, I thought, were a little bit braver in this match than they were against Flamengo, but not brave enough still. They had most of the possession of the ball early, even though they were not doing much with it. Um, One of the reasons why they get an early chance is Elias Mokwane's defending, actually. He and Ogbelu force a quick turnover. The ball finds its way to Beleli, who hits it one time. Hugo Lloris makes a good save. After the first 10 minutes or so, LAFC come back and they start dominating possession. So it's back and forth and back and forth. LAFC were hurting Espérance when Olivier Giroud would show to the ball. So if the midfielder has the ball, Olivier Giroud shows to the ball, and the Gabonese winger, Denis Bouanga, would make a run in behind the defending line. So he would make those runs, not just him, but mostly him. So whenever he had those diagonal runs behind the Espérance defense, that was hurting them. And it would make them sort of second guess themselves throughout the match. That was really LAFC's only real plan of attack, was to make sure they get people making those runs in behind the Espérance defense. But having Yassine Meriah back countered. Why did it counter? Because he made sure he held that defensive line, and I think they forced LAFC to be offsides maybe 6 or 7 times in that match. And that's because they had a good, solid communicator, the captain, Yassine Meriah, back. He's been missing the whole year, and I think if they had him again, I think they would have won further in the CAF Champions League. As for Yusuf Belali, as I mentioned with Lucas Ribeiro, Belali was Belali. Now that's in all dimensions. He can be sometimes equal parts brilliant genius and at the same time frustrating. And he's like a walking football paradox in that sense. But he was doing everything. He was nutmegging players, flicks here and there, beautiful passes, beautiful shots. He was, again, the burden of the entire Espérance attack was falling on his shoulders, and he was happily shouldering that. Um, Now, as the second half begins, it's clear, in my opinion, that the Esperance fullbacks are having a good game. They're neutralizing Denis Buenga when it was one-on-one dribbling. They had great cardio. Ben Hamida in particular, he reminds me so much of Nacho Monreal. Up and down, like kind of skinny, but at the same time, really solid defensively. And Ben Ali also had great cardio. And the goal comes from Ben Hamida as left back. He sort of makes another slalom, fantastic run. To be fair, he gets tackled, and I think his body like goes into an LAFC defender, so maybe it should have been a foul. Ball finds its way to Yusuf Belali, who just makes sure he gets a shot on goal, and it goes in 1-0. Um, Deserved, in my opinion. Esperance were the better side. After the goal, Esperance counterattacked very well, and they should have added probably a second and a third goal, particularly when they subbed on Jan Sass. He could have had 2 goals. Derbelli also hit the crossbar from a corner counterattack as well. So again, it's one of those where when I see how good they counterattack, how well they counterattack, it makes me think, why are they a little bit more brave at the beginning? Because if they just get 1 goal or 2 goals, then teams have to come out. Because LAFC was a little bit cautious, but if teams have to come out and attack them, and they're that effective with their counterattacking play, uh, yeah, sometimes you scratch your head. But anyways, in the end, they were, I thought, the better side. LAFC, it got a little bit dramatic at the end. They won a penalty kick in the final minute of the game, and that should have been Said, who I thought had a poor first game. I thought he was actually had a good first game, but he was very poor with his distribution. In this match, didn't have to distribute the ball so much. But he was probably man of the match alongside Yusuf Benedi. He came up with a huge last minute kick save to ensure that Esperance go away with the 3 points. And that 3 points, by the way, equals $2 million. So Esperance and Mamelodi Sundowns are leaving this tournament with $11.5 million for those 2 victories. Congrats to them. And yeah, that's where we're at right now. So tomorrow we have Juventus against Wydad. Hope Wydad can do the same and play with bravery. I think they played pretty bravely against Manchester City. So I hope they can do the same this time around. And yeah, don't forget that we are going to be not live streaming, but we're going to have a watch along for Fluminense versus Mamelodi Sundowns, the third and final match of the group stages, on this YouTube channel. So I'm going to be setting up a stream for that tomorrow, as well as putting up a little poster for social media. So if you're interested in that, would love to have you. And yeah, thanks for listening to another episode. Speak to you all very soon. Peace.